Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is, well, it sounds simple, but it's actually pretty huge. We're going to try and dismantle maybe the biggest certainty we all have about reality. We're diving into this idea that time, the thing we measure our lives by, might not actually exist in the way we fundamentally feel it does. I mean, we all share this really deep feeling, don't we? That time is like a river, relentless, always flowing in one direction, carrying us along. And that belief, that feeling, it dictates so much how we live, what we stress about, how we plan everything.
Right. But the sources we've been looking at, and they span everything from like cutting-edge quantum physics to really ancient spiritual traditions, they paint a totally different picture. They suggest time isn't a river. It's not that it's fake exactly, but it's way more flexible, behaves less like that current and, well, more like a massive hologram that we're just walking through, like coordinates on a map.
Okay, a hologram. Let's try and unpack that a bit. Because if time is this temporal hologram where past, present, future all exist right now, how does that square with, the clock on the wall?
Yeah.
So yeah, our focus today is really pulling on those threads, connecting the hard science with these deeper philosophical and spiritual ideas about this persistent illusion.
To even start understanding time's flexibility, I guess we have to go where reality usually gets weird. Quantum physics. The view there, from what I'm gathering, suggests that past, present, future, they aren't sequential events. They actually already coexist, like right now, simultaneously.
Yeah, the material uses a great metaphor for this, the movie reel. Imagine every single moment of your life, every memory you have, every possible future. They're all like individual frames on this huge movie reel. We, as the conscious observers, we experience those frames one after another, and that creates the feeling of flow, of linear time passing. But the really crucial point is that the entire film, the whole reel, is already there. It's complete. Nothing's waiting to happen in a sense. And what's really wild is that this isn't just some new age idea. You mentioned physics people like Albert Einstein were wrestling with this exact thing. Didn't he call our experience of time the persistent illusion?
He did, exactly. For Einstein, this clear separation we feel between past, present, and future, it was just that, a stubbornly persistent illusion created by our consciousness. He totally acknowledged the illusion is real for us, it shapes our lives, definitely. But he didn't buy into the fundamental reality of time flowing like we feel it. In his block universe concept, space-time is four-dimensional, and all events are just fixed coordinates within it, equally real. The idea that one moment is gone and another hasn't arrived yet, that's just a feature of how we perceive things, not some universal truth.
Okay, but then why? If all those moments, all those frames on the reel are already fixed, why do we only experience this now? Why does our brain insist on this linear sequence if the universe doesn't necessarily operate that way?
Well, that's down to biology. It seems to be a biological imperative. The research suggests our brains actively construct this feeling of a linear now because, frankly, it's essential for coherence, for survival. I mean, just imagine the chaos if your consciousness perceived every frame at once. You're remembering breakfast, stressing about tomorrow's meeting, feeling yourself sitting here, all simultaneously. It would just be instantaneous cognitive meltdown, right?
Total overload.
So the brain is constantly filtering, sequencing those frames, putting them in order. And that sequencing allows us to understand causality, A happened, then B happened, which is absolutely necessary for making decisions, for learning, for just interacting with the world in a functional way, this linear perception of time. It's basically the brain putting on blinders so we can navigate straight ahead without being completely overwhelmed by every single moment that exists.
Right, okay. This is where it gets really interesting for me, connecting that big quantum structure down to like your own personal experience. If the whole reel exists already, then what are memory and imagination? Are they just abstract thoughts floating around?
The way the source material frames it, they're more like mechanisms of access. So when you recall a past event really vividly, with all the sights and sounds and feelings, or when you visualize a future goal with intense focus and emotion, you're not just thinking abstractly about some non-existent past or future. You're actually momentarily shifting your conscious focus. You're tuning your frequency, so to speak, to another frame on that reel that already exists. You're basically accessing different coordinates within this huge system.
Okay, let's clarify frequency, though, because we're not talking literal radio waves here, are we?
No, not in a scientific measurement sense. It's more metaphorical. Think of it as the level and direction of your focus, your attention, your emotional state. You're essentially changing your conscious coordinate within this temporal hologram. It's kind of like typing in the specific location of a file you want to open a file that already exists on a massive hard drive. Your current state, your emotions, your beliefs, They act like the search terms that help you align with a corresponding frame.
And this brings us right to that classic example, doesn't it? The ultimate glitch in the Matrix feeling, déjà vu. That weird, intense feeling that you've been here before.
Exactly. Déjà vu, often dismissed, traditional psychology might say it's just a memory error, maybe a processing lag in the brain. Simple explanations. But if we accept this model, the idea that the frames are fixed, then déjà vu suddenly becomes potentially powerful evidence. The material we looked at calls that feeling a temporal glitch. It's like a flicker, a confirmation that your present consciousness has briefly aligned with the previous moment of attention on that exact same coordinate, that same frame. It suggests you have actually been on this frame before, even if your linear operating system insists this is the very first time. It's like hearing the sequential illusion crackle for just a second.
But that idea of a fixed real, it does raise a pretty big question, maybe an uncomfortable one.
Yeah.
If every moment is already fixed, if the entire film is already spooled up, doesn't that kind of imply everything is predetermined? Like fatalism. If all the frames exist, where's our free will in all this? Are we just passively watching the movie unfold?
That is definitely the central philosophical challenge here, isn't it? And the sources offer a really fascinating way to think about it. The freedom, they suggest, isn't necessarily in changing the frames themselves because they might be fixed coordinates. The freedom lies in choosing which frame you consciously tune into next. And maybe, just as importantly, how you choose to experience the frame you're currently in. Your consciousness is like the projector beam lighting up the frame. The choice is where you point that beam and what color light, what emotional quality you infuse into this moment of now. And this is actually where a lot of spiritual traditions offer incredible context. Think about Eastern philosophies like Hinduism or Buddhism. They basically arrived at a very similar conclusion, without needing quantum physics labs. Their insight is that there's fundamentally only the eternal now.
So the spiritual perspective kind of collapses the whole timeline.
It simplifies it radically, yeah. From that viewpoint, the past is nothing more than recorded memory, a thought pattern held right here in the present moment. The future, same deal. It's anticipated imagination, also just a mental event happening now. The only constant, the only thing you can ever truly verify is your own consciousness, the observer, which is always, always anchored right here in the present. Everything else is a construct built around that now for sequencing.
And we actually feel this shift, don't we, when we get into flow states?
Yeah.
Like think about when you're meditating really deeply, or maybe you go into flow playing music or coding or painting, whatever it is for you. In those moments, you kind of slip right out of clock time.
Yeah.
The anxiety about the ticking clock just dissolves.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I remember working on this really complex bit of code once, and I looked up and like 3 hours had just vanished. Felt like maybe 20 minutes. That's clock time, just not being the boss anymore. Exactly. Flow states are maybe the most common way we intentionally slip out of that linear straitjacket because your attention is so completely absorbed in the internal experience, the task itself, and not on the external measurement of time passing. You're essentially moving through the frames in a different rate, subjectively. And this explains those common experiences we all have, right? Why an hour doing something you love can feel like 5 minutes, or conversely, why a single minute waiting for important news can feel like an absolute eternity. You're literally experiencing the passage of frames differently based on the quality and focus of your attention. So if we take this bigger view, the timeline as fixed, simultaneous, and connected back, it really changes how we might interpret things like synchronicity.
Meaningful coincidences.
Right. Yeah, synchronicity. That moment where two seemingly separate events line up perfectly, almost like they're sending you a personal message. Well, in this model, it's maybe not some miracle of random chance or cosmic luck. If the whole film reel is already complete, the universe doesn't necessarily have to wait for a linear cause and effect to play out. It could simply line up two events out of time to give you a message, as one source put it. Those events were always there as fixed coordinates on the reel. Your consciousness, maybe by achieving a certain frequency of focus or emotional state, just happened to tune in to the exact coordinate, the exact frame where those two events intersected. So you didn't cause the events in a linear way, perhaps, but you consciously chose to arrive on the frame where they were perfectly aligned for you to notice.
Wow. Okay, so let's boil this down. What does all this mean for you listening right now? The big takeaway is, if time is just a coordinate system, like latitude and longitude, but for moments, then it stops being a prison. It's no longer this relentless current pulling you towards some inevitable, maybe scary future you can't control. The really crucial practical insight here seems to be about agency within that potentially fixed system. You're not just a passive passenger on a train going down a predetermined track. You are, as our source material puts it quite beautifully, learning to navigate this temporal landscape like a starship.
Yeah, I like that metaphor. A starship needs a few things, right? It needs a pilot that's your conscious awareness. It needs a destination that's your intentional future frame, the one you vividly visualize and act towards. And it needs navigation tools that's your attention, anchored firmly in the present moment. You can't steer the starship by constantly looking in the rearview mirror at past frames you've already flown through. And you can't fly it properly if you're only gripped by anxiety about potential future asteroid fields,
Yeah.
The power to choose your immediate trajectory, your next coordinate, is always held right here, right now. And this kind of resolves that free will question, doesn't it? Maybe you're not burdened with creating the entire path from scratch. Maybe the task is selecting which fixed path, which available frame you step onto next with your conscious choice in this moment. Every decision you make, where you put your focus, what emotion you choose to cultivate and sustain, it's essentially like selecting the next frame on the reel that resonates with that internal frequency you're holding.
Which means your power in the immediate present moment is, well, it's absolute in a way. The power to choose which frame comes next, which potential future you start pulling towards you. It only exists in this breath, only in the pause between thoughts.
And remember that really simple but powerful distinction. Every single time you intentionally pause, take a deliberate breath, and really anchor your awareness in just being here now, feeling your senses, you are, for a moment, stepping outside the hypnotic pull of the linear illusion. You're pulling back from the relentless tick-tock and recentering yourself in the actual reality, which is always the eternal now.
So yeah, what does this all mean? I think it means that having the ability, even just the awareness, to step outside that illusion. It gives you the highest form of agency we can probably access. You start to realize you're not totally constrained by past mistakes that feel fixed or dictated by some future that feels terrifyingly unknowable. So maybe try this. Just a little experiment today. Think of one thing that usually causes you stress. Maybe a looming deadline, a chore you dread. And instead of getting caught up in the linear pressure of just getting it done, just for a moment, pause, breathe, and consciously choose the emotional frequency, the feeling state you want to bring to engaging with that task right now. Because if all possible timelines, all potential frames coexist, maybe that conscious choice you make in the current now allows you to literally pick the timeline you want to surf next. What new frame, maybe a more beautiful or powerful one, could you intentionally choose for your very next now?
Until the next deep dive, keep exploring, keep navigating.